Joined now by Cam Redden and the Daily Telegraph's journalist, James Willis. James, welcome. This news poll, the first time a majority of voters expect the coalition to win the federal election, coinciding too with that new positioning ad we just saw there from the Liberal Party. I tell you, Cam, if you don't define yourself in politics, your opponent will do it for you. So I suspect that's what's behind the Liberal campaign team messaging here, isn't it?
Yeah, I was getting some flashbacks, Peter, to I think it was 2018 during the Turnbull spill when Peter Dutton said he wanted to show a slightly different side of himself, smile a little bit more. I know the Prime Minister's never let him forget that phrase. You do have to do this in a campaign. There are a few more smiling faces and handshakes and high fives in this one because it can't be all about the hard policy issues, as much as, of course, they do matter. You do need to show Australians that you're a human being. So I suspect that's part of what this new ad campaign is about today. On the broader narrative, though, Peter, and one undercurrent that we looked at a little bit today, now that both leaders have been back on deck for a couple of weeks, there is a clear theme emerging about this pre-election campaign period, and that is very much that we are seeing the coalition on the ascendancy, on the attack, and the government having to play defensive across the country. I had a look at just the seat visits that the leaders have made over the last fortnight, and it is just red seats across the board. There is only one seat, Peter, in the last fortnight where the Prime Minister has visited that is not playing defensive in a Labor seat. That was Braddon in Tasmania, a possible pickup because an MP there is retiring, a long-time Liberal. Everywhere else, the coalition has been on the attack in marginal Labor seats, teal seats, Green seats. That is the theme that's emerging here, and it's reflected again in the news poll numbers today, that the coalition is gaining in confidence. They feel they're a real chance here right across the board, and Labor is having to try and play defensive before you even think about where they might pick up a seat or two to try and hang on to majority government. So, of course, there's a proper campaign to play out, but that is the theme emerging in these early weeks of the year.
I tell you, Cam, you could be a political staffer with that sort of analysis. That's exactly what I used to look at this early in the pre-season before the campaign. I'll also make the point for people at home, at the last election, if you look at Labor's primary vote, only 3 out of 10 Australians voted for Anthony Albanese. 7 out of 10 Australians did not. And this is a first-term government. Usually that number's way higher because you come in on a landslide. And he got out James all over the summer. He worked hard. But it looks like, the more they saw of Anthony Albanese, the worse it's hit his numbers. Maybe he needs to sort of put his feet up and shut the door and stay at home, because actually getting out there is impacting that net satisfaction number. He dropped a massive 6 points. He's also, basically double where the opposition leader is. Whatever he's selling, whatever the PM's selling, voters aren't buying it, are they?
Well, that's right. And Peter, clearly he was warned by advisors to stay away from the very nice sporting events over the last few weeks. I heard last night in the Australian Open final, Richard Marles was there. No mention of the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. He would have been there in previous years. But certainly the polling, and you make a really good point. If you look back to 2022, it wasn't a case of one of these all-time historic Labor victories like Kevin 07 or Bob Hawke, where Labor romped home. I mean, it was more about Scott Morrison losing than it was about Anthony Albanese winning. And so 1 in 3 Aussies last time voted Labor. You look at the polling now, some polls had the Labor primary vote, one I read from a few weeks ago, at 27%. The Prime Minister's approval rating is the big problem. Leadership, preferred PM, I think they're all massive issues moving forward. And despite being on this campaign, those numbers are going backwards. For Peter Dutton, it really is about this small target approach. And I make this point. The last 2 weeks, Peter, I've spoken to dozens of small businesses for a story we're working on at the Daily Telegraph. Now, the overwhelming feedback is obviously energy. The wage bill, which has obviously been pushed by Labor, there's been major changes to IR over the last few years. The increases, the cost of things like a barista have really forced businesses to actually scale back the hours that they can put people on, or force the small business owner back on the tools. That's what they're all talking about. And the other thing is, for every economist and every elite journalist that bags Peter Dutton's tax cut in terms of the meal allowance for small business, for entertainment, for every economist that bags it, there's 5 small businesses saying, hey, you know what? We haven't had a tax break in a long period of time. It's actually a good idea. So there's plenty of gain to be had there on top of migration, on top of energy, and of course nuclear. The other point I'd make, Peter, Labor might want to have a look at its social media profiles for the Prime Minister, Chris Bowen, and some other senior Labor people, because for every video they're putting out, there's hundreds of comments that are going in, actually whacking them and criticising them. So someone in Labor HQ should be doing some moderation there, because they're not getting a fair go.